very, very powerful. I think anything we say, we're really scratching the surface too. I learn more and more. So I'm going to try and speak a little, let me know if there's things you want to say or interrupt at any time. I think in response to with Claire, the last time I was in the federal system was for the School of the Americas, and it's been a little more than 15 years ago, but I did a year at Carswell Air Base, and I saw so much death this time. And I've been in the jails, believe me, and working in jail ministry in Syracuse. But when you die now in the federal system, it's it's all over the U.S., but what they do is they shackle you for 24 hours after death. They take you out of the prison shackled. For 24 hours, you're shackled in case you're faking it. This is the Federal Bureau of Prisons, but the mentality and so much of what I saw this time around, it just goes on and on. I want to tell an embarrassing story about myself at the first coming to after I'd been at the Catholic Worker for a little while, but and young and full of it and naive and full of it, but I answer the phone. I'm on the house in New York, St. Joseph's, and I answer the phone, and it's a social worker, and she's telling me, now this was a long time ago in the 70s, so but she said, I have a prisoner who's getting out of prison, and we're trying to find him a bed. Now here, I've been doing the works of mercy and feeding the hungry and just this incredible, beautiful place at the Catholic Worker, and I hear her say prisoner, and I go, that's how naive I was. I'll never forget this moment. And we had not one bed. I mean, more or less, I was let off the hook, but that's how stupid and ignorant I was, and I reacted. A prisoner, oh my God. It just came out. And it wasn't long after that I wanted to explore. I had the opportunity to say, well, maybe I should go to jail, facing this issue I was facing and see for myself. But and realizing that the most neglected work of mercy is visiting the prisoner. Mm-hmm. And the reason that we're in the situation we are in this country is because it is the most neglected work of mercy. And it's also, they don't make it easy for us. I mean, you try to sit in a visiting room and you watch, they'll turn people away, they'll cut the visiting hours, or there's an emergency, or is this, or you have to sign up early in the morning and come back late afternoon in the jail. When, at Syracuse, Buffalo, Rochester, it's spinning and snowing and sleeting, and you have kids. I mean, they put up as many barriers as they possibly can. And in terms of oversight, there is no oversight that is effective. And what little there is, they can't do it. I can't tell you, how many layers, and it doesn't work, and it doesn't work. And I just want to tell you a story about the Syracuse jail. And I'm not even talking yet about the toxic prisons, and I was just at a conference on that. But working in the Syracuse jail, was it in the early 90s, Paul, maybe? I think. So I had been in prison for plowshares, and I did 2 years, Alderson, West Virginia, for the Griffiths plowshares, and I came out of there, and then, I want to do jail ministry, and I moved to Syracuse, New York to join the jail ministry. And one of the things I first noticed is this wonderful collective of people doing jail ministry, being the hands and feet, bringing in toiletries, bringing in Bibles, moving people who were in jail so they wouldn't lose all their positions. If you can imagine, well, you can, all of the situations, and calling the families, calling the lawyers, writing the judges, visiting them in the jail, going to court with them, making sure they, just everything that's entailed. It's just so much work. But, so I joined the collective, the jail minister group, doing wonderful, wonderful things. But I noticed how much jail ministry was doing, and I was a little outraged because the jail didn't even provide underwear or toiletries. I mean, there was so much that jail ministry was doing with so little. And we had meetings twice a year with the jail administration. And it was always the same issues. And it's still the same issues. There's, after 25, 30 years, there's still no handbook for the prisoners in the language they can speak and read. And I mean, it's still the same issues, and outrageous. And I started rebelling and saying, you know, yes, we're doing these wonderful things, but we've got to hold their feet to the fire a little. They're supposed to be providing this, and they just put more. I mean, we're cashing prisoners' checks that they might get so that they'll have money in their account, things that the jail is responsible for. But anyway, this was a jail that I'd been in, and my friends from the Griffiths Plowshares and Syracuse, Dan Berrigan, Phil Berrigan, Liz, all of us been arrested in this awful little jail in Syracuse. But after quite a few years at jail ministry, I was driving a bus of families to the what we call the Loop Attica, Wyoming, Windy, and the jail ministry had they drove families once a month. Was it once a month for people to visit their families in the prison system? So, and it's snowing, or slightly, of course, and I'm driving, and a little woman named Frances Briglin, right over here in the front seat, she says to me, I was in jail recently, and I go, Frances, you were? And she's a small woman, and she said, yeah, she said, they shackled me on the bars. And I'm like, shackled on the bars? Like, yeah, I don't even get that. But then she said something to me that profoundly affected me. She said, but I deserved it, I was drunk. And something about that, you know, at that moment, somebody telling me they were shackled on the bars, but then saying they deserved it because they were drunk. And I don't know, all kinds of things came together, and I started looking for evidence, and it was really hard to figure out what this thing was. And you would hear rumors. So jail ministry had been in there so many years, but were we asking all of the right questions? But did we ever stop and say, you know, really, how are you doing, or how are you being treated, or give them time to really talk about, you know? And I think lawyers had heard of it. One lawyer had pictures in his files that he never showed to anybody of this thing that I'm talking about. So finally, I started looking for more evidence. I was visiting in the jail. I started seeing the swollen hands. Well, this shackling, what it was they were shackling the prisoners on the bars naked, stretched out. So the feet were shackled together with metal shackles, and the hands were shackled like this, with a Syracuse University football helmet on their head that they got from SU, and the hands were shackled way up on the bars. And so with the feet, and the shackles across the feet, they'd tie the sheet between the shackles and then pull underneath their bunk, they'd tie it. But they could get it so tight that you were literally swinging. And I saw evidence with people, you know, with their hands so swollen they couldn't play cards or pick up a spoon or a fork. It's a long story, but they literally called this the Jesus Christ in the jail. Now, who does that? You know, and right under our noses. And the prisoners called it the Jesus Christ. But then, you know, a lot of times they don't always tell their story, and they figure, oh, well, I deserved it. I was drunk. And they don't bother telling a lot of people because nobody really believes them anyway. They're prisoners. And they would tell the lawyers, but the lawyers, you know, one person had pictures of it looked like tattoos after it was done, because for the rest of their lives they had a black ring around their hand and ankles, and it was like a tattoo that stayed there from the injury, and they had nerve damage too in their hands and feet. And I found out, and it was so god-awful. I tried everything, and I'd always been told by judges and prosecutors, Miss Rumpf, there's a system in place, you don't have to get arrested. So I'm thinking, okay, so I don't know what to do, God. So I start knocking on doors. And I talk to the district attorney, I talk to the congressman, I talk to the mayor, I talk to the Catholic Lawyers Guild. I talk and knock on doors of everybody I can think of. And either people didn't care, or they didn't believe it, you know, or they agreed with it, so what, you know. And I really, honestly, I did not know what to do, and it came to me in an odd place. So what I did was I built a cage. A friend of mine built a cage out of PVC pipe, and I moved it to the front of the jail. And I had a statement ready. I didn't know what else to do, but I had a statement, and I had a sign on the cage that said low-income housing. And when the police saw me move the cage to the public safety building, the police are downstairs, the jail's upstairs, one comes out and looks out and, you know, what are you doing now, you know, and I said, I'm just going to be out here, you know, in the cage, and, you know, and he said, well, you can stay out in the rain as long as you want, ha, 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 and I truly believe, because I did try to get a permit, but nobody could figure out if it was county or city property, but I truly believe they dismissed the power of the truth, you know, that it was time for this to come out. They didn't dismiss me, or, you know, they can laugh at me as sitting out there in the rain all they want. So I had a notebook, and I got so much more information. People were coming out of the jail after visiting, or this one or that one, and then telling me, oh, this one is shackled now, or this one is shackled now. And they would do it to people who were drunk, intoxicated, or intoxicated on drugs. They would do it for just about, but especially the mentally ill, and especially the young African American men, and the young Muslims who would become Muslims, and with the SU football helmet on their head. After they shackled them and took the helmet off their head, they'd say to the black young men, they'd say, now your football scholarship is over with, ha, 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 ha. I mean, that's how bad. So living in the cage was really incredible, because it became a place. And I think of Dan Berrigan. He always had this quote, well, there's a saying, don't just stand there, do something. Dan Berrigan always said, don't just do something, stand there. So, but this cage became a place for people to come and tell their story. Coming out of the jail, coming out from visiting the jail, the homeless, some of the guys from Unity Acres came down to guard me to make sure I'd be safe, and they were sniffing glue in the corner of the public safety building. But, you know, I mean, it really was a community of very special people, and so much storytelling. And I believe that when you're in the criminal so-called justice system, everybody has their story. It's like a grand theft of stories, because your story is stolen from you, and then you're told who and what you are. And, you know, I think about plowshares on the jail. I think about taking hammers and beating swords into plowshares. And I think about how these jails destroy our communities. And the monies, when they build the new ones, that money belongs to the people in the community, and belongs to people to create systems to help other people. Instead of spending $53 million on a new jail, which we never spent $53 million on anything, but we're going to spend it out of jail, instead of services for women and children and youth who are in trouble, and all these other wonderful things you can do to build this awful, awful place. But just as a story in terms of what came out, I didn't know what was going to come out in terms of the cage, but when I got out of the cage, I had a lot more stories. One reporter did a story, or a few, while I was in the cage. They walked in to see the chief of the jail, who, and Paul would remember, always had a sign on his desk that says, God is my co-pilot. So the reporter asked Chuck Pirro, you know, are you shackling people in the jail? Oh, no. And Miss Rumpf, she can sit out in the rain as long as she wants. She's crazy, she's this, she's that, you know. But in the end, you know, I had enough information. I got out of the jail cell. I heard on National Public Radio Physicians for Human Rights for the first time. Now, they had never investigated an American jail, ever. They go to places that we know they torture people in other countries, in Haiti, or, I mean, so many countries. They had never been in an American jail. But I called them, and then I called 60 Minutes, and Physicians for Human Rights did come in, and they documented, they went on 60 Minutes in the end. They investigated, and they went on 60 Minutes calling it torture. And then they released the report. In the end, they brought it down a notch by calling it cruel and inhuman punishment, because they were afraid of being sued, because it's the first case of documented torture in the United States. And you don't do that in America, you know, so that's just that story. So I'm just going to talk briefly about a conference I was just at in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It was on toxic prisons. There's a lot of work going on, but so recently outside of Pittsburgh they were given $500 million to build a new federal prison. So there was a lot of mining done in Pennsylvania, and they were removing the tops of mountains and doing the coal mining, and they would flatten the whole tops of the mountains. So now the coal mines have, or the companies have left, and they leave the flattened wasteland with the coal waste laying there. And everybody, you know, what are we going to do now? And so, oh, let's build prisons. We can make money with that, and we can get more jobs. They're building prisons on top of the coal waste and the coal dust. The prison I was in at Carswell in Texas was built 1 mile from a Superfund cleanup site, which is the worst toxic dump. There's different levels of toxic dumps. Many prisons are built within 2 or 3 or 4 miles of toxic dumps. Ours was 1 mile. Employees are being told to bring in their own drinking water, and prisoners are being forced to drink the water. Prisons on former military installations have an increase in cancer. You know, and we're talking about also for the staff, that they're going to be affected by the coal dust, and they're going to be sickened. But it's so outrageous. So I went to this conference, and I was speaking on the Carswell prison. There were Black Panthers there who had done 28, 30 years in prison. There were, now what's happened is the very radical environmentalists are teaming with the prison abolitionists, because of all the toxic waste and everything that's happening. So environmental people are getting involved with this prison stuff and working towards abolition of prison. There's a lot of people who are working with prisoners on the inside in a very underground manner, because any prisoner being caught trying to organize, and there's a lot of work strikes going on in prison because of working conditions. I know the last time I was in prison, prisoners in the kitchen were getting 8 cents an hour for working, and the memo came around the prison that they were being overpaid, and it was dropped to like 7 cents an hour, I believe, more thereabouts. I mean, it's so outrageous, and I don't even think of, you know, better prisons or better oversight or better anything. Because the only answer is the prison abolition and just replacing the whole thing. The kinds of there's always a few good people working in the prisons, and I know they helped me when I was living in the cage. A few of them came out to the cage after a few days and told me to keep it up. I was doing a good job, and went on 60 Minutes in disguise to tell the truth, at risk of their jobs. You know, these are the heroes too. These people, like you were talking about, there's no one for them to talk to. So there's so many working in the prisons that would risk their jobs if they said anything. They have house payments and families and college funds to, you know, they can't do it. There's no place for people to go and tell the truth, which is a huge problem. Also there was coming together And a lot of it is very underground, but if you look up prison abolition and toxic prison on the website, you can start getting involved. And if you belong to the organization or any kind of organization like this, you have to kind of stay underground because they watch for any of us, you know, in terms of trying to connect with prisoners and trying to educate them. But there is a lot of education going on, a lot of strikers and a lot of punishment. And they will, I saw 14 women die in Carswell prison for a year, when I was doing the year. I saw things I couldn't believe, and I have seen so many wrongful deaths, so many. But it's massive now, it's massive. They're not going to take care of you. In a federal prison, you go to the prison they assign you to, and if you get sick, they wait to diagnose you till you're in maybe 3rd or 4th stage cancer, until really it's too late. And then they'll send you to Texas. And then they'll delay your health care. And then they won't give you compassionate release. I was trained in hospice in Syracuse when I went to Carswell Prison. There were many women who 3rd and 4th stage and other diseases and illnesses who were dying. There was not one book in the library on death and dying and wellness. And I had a few books that I got. And people were writing me when I was telling them stories of the women there. These women did not get the death penalty. I mean, but, you know, so I noticed, you know, when I had these books that they would just swallow them up, you know, amongst themselves. And I was with the hospital population. And so I asked permission from the warden to start a bookshelf on death and dying and wellness. My friends wanted to send books to help the women, and they denied me. And then they started a hospice unit within the prison. Hospice doesn't belong in prison. It's just a facade, and people need to be released and home with their families or in a more caring environment community. Pain management is not what it needs to be. They know more about taking away from you. This prison I was in was very twisted, this particular one, and it was the only one for women who were sick, but it was run by a psychiatrist. And there was a lot of isolation, like they came in one day and took all the crochet supplies out. I mean, these were women, a lot of Latina from other countries, and you know, they were kept taking away and taking away. So you're living in this dorm, or in a cell for 2. You had one cabinet to keep every personal item you had. That was it. You couldn't have a picture of Jesus, your mother, your husband, your children. So it was very sterile, very, very sterile. You walked in a dorm and it looked as if nobody lived there. There's women doing 20, 30, and men years, and they're living as if they don't exist. Everything they own has to be in this little locker. And they would send tour groups in, and oh, isn't this nice, and oh, it's so clean and polished. And the floors, you know, of course we would do the floors, and you know, and then there was the education department, and there were 16 computers, and it was all windows all the way around, and oh my, this is really wonderful. Nobody ever saw that not one computer had ever been hooked up, you know, and I could go on, and I want to be able to open up and let people share, but what is going on now is so deadly, and spiritually in the soul, and in every level of destruction of people on every level. And then there is the workers who are working in there, and how they become degraded themselves, and how, I mean, there's really some brutal ones in there too, but what it does, and you know, when the 60-minute piece came out in Syracuse on, you know, on TV, there was not a huge outcry in Syracuse. And I never blamed deputies by name. I blamed the system. And I blamed all of us in Syracuse. You know, we're all responsible. You know, they're doing all this, but they get their attitudes from us. You know, the jailers, you know, from society at large. I mean, we've let it get this bad, this attitude, this mentality. But it's as bad as it can possibly get. Of course, it's going to get worse, but there's so much killing in it. I could say anything to anybody, you know, in terms of visiting, is really to listen and to believe the stories. So also thank anybody for doing the work. So open it up